of GroupM CV, Joanne Davis, the CEO of Joanne Davis Consulting, Sergey Koptev, Chairman of Publicis Group Media Eurasia, and Rob Laurence, CEO of GroupM in North America.
Very much indeed. My name is Jonathan Charles. I'm a presenter with BBC World News and anchor with BBC World News, the BBC's global news channel. Before that, I was a foreign correspondent for 20 years, including spending a lot of time here in Moscow. Well, today we are discussing the very challenging conditions that exist for agencies. We've got about 45 minutes or so to do that. And we have a very distinguished panel. Before I do my introductions, let me bring them all on. First of all, you can see on the far right there, Laurence Boschetto, who is the Chief Executive Officer and President of GroupM. Next to Laurence is the only lady on our panel, Joanne Davis, Chief Executive Officer of Joanne Davis Consulting. Then there's Sergey Koptev, here, second on the left here, and he is the Chairman of Publicis Group Media Eurasia. And Rob Norman is our fourth panellist, the Chief Executive of the GroupM North America. Lots of experience between them, of course, and lots of knowledge of the difficult conditions that we live in. Let me say, as I look out at the audience today, I'm glad to see that you're all sober. No one here is drunk. Clearly, my view of the advertising industry has been unduly influenced by watching too many episodes of Mad Men on television, where, as far as I can see, advertising executives during the 1950s and 60s seem to spend most of their time drinking heavily, either with clients or themselves. For those of you who've seen Mad Men, you'll know that it portrays Madison Avenue, the advertising industry, as a time of great affluence in the 1950s and 60s, where money just seemed to roll into advertising agencies. They didn't have to do that much to get it, and they were able to charge their clients huge amounts of money. It is a far cry from the conditions that we see today in the global advertising industry, a far cry from the challenges, particularly that have emerged in this aftermath of the global recession. With no more ado, let's spend the next 40 minutes or so discussing just how the agency model is changing. And let me start by asking you all individually, maybe I'll start with you, Laurence, just give us some historical context now of just how challenging conditions are for agencies.
You know, I think the last 24 hours we've heard a tremendous amount of comments that have been made. And even if you just listen to the key messages from the Yahoo presenter, he was talking about change. He was talking about trying to get out ahead of it so that you can manage it. He's talking about consumer behavior is radically in a state of transition. Talking about clients are under an inordinate amount of pressure to try to get ahead of it and control of it. So when we take a look at it, where do I think we are and what do I think we need to do? I don't think it's really a simple solution. I think it's multiple things. We look at our agency and believe we are living in a constant beta test. It's the world has changed, the consumer has changed, the economy has changed, politics have changed. So appropriately, we need to be able to change as fluently and as frequently as the market is. What does that mean? It pretty much means we need to kind of evolve from a marketing perspective into real-time communications. If our clients need real solutions every single day through our marketing communication power, we need to be able to address their issues. We need to be nimble and fluid to adjust finances, adjust resources, and most importantly, take those ideas, which really have to be able to work through multiple channels and multiple touch points, and modify them based on what we're hearing people say through Twitter, through social communities, and be able to make sure the attributes of our clients' brands are in alignment with what the world is saying. So I think as close as we can really get by bringing art, science, and metrics together so that we can get greater control in a more fluid and ever-changing environment, the greater control and the greater value we'll be putting back into our client agency engagement.
I'll come to you last, Joanne. In a way, the other side of the fence. Sergey, how challenging do you think are conditions now for media agencies to be at this?
Одна из моих любимых книг в конце 80-х годов была книга Роберта Уотермана, которая называлась «Фактор обновления». Принял фактор. Основное, что он там говорил, это нужно меняться в ногу со временем. не нужно его опережать, не нужно от него отставать. Но сейчас совершенно точно я понимаю, наверное, ушло какое-то время, что мы не менялись много со временем. Ситуация, конечно же, изменилась. Изменилась, ну, прежде всего, потому что стало более фрагментированным медиа. С другой стороны, многие медиа превратились в коммуны. Меньше стало цениться интеллектуальное.
Less value is attached to individual efforts.
Вот стало, ну, как бы,
More value
procurement-driven.
is given to procurement-driven.
С этим не очень комфортно.
It's not a very good situation to live in.
Sergey, thank you very much indeed. Rob Norman, give us some historical overview here as to keep us back on your career, just how challenging conditions are now compared to perhaps when you first went into this business.
Well, I'm a terribly young person. So
Compared to last week, that's
yeah,
right.
so I refuse to give historical perspective. I think that to understand it, you have to think about what the core purpose of the business is. And I don't sense that the core purpose of our business, which is the media specialist part of the marketing communication business, has really changed that much from a core purpose. We have always been in the business of distributing messaging through whichever channels consumers choose to use. That's it. That's what we do. And to me, we still do that today. The challenge now, of course, is that there are so many different forms of messaging and so many different forms of channels and so many different types of data that are generated by those. It's become enormously complex. I think one of the challenges that the media agencies face in an effort to decommoditize what they did in the last 10 years and 5 years ago, some of them took their eye off the ball a little bit in terms of really being expert at that distribution process. It's a general feeling I have that you should engage in businesses in areas where you think you can be the best business of your type in the world. And we do many things in our business, but the heart is message distribution, and I'm confident that we can build a business to be best in the world at doing that.
Just before you do that, Rob, can I just ask Joanne, I mean, you look at things from the other side of the fence, and you described yourself to me the other day as like a marriage broker. You're trying to bring together the client with the agency. So how does it look from that perspective?
From where we sit, Jonathan, it's a tough situation. Every client we talk to says, I want more, better, faster, and then they say, for less money. So the pressure that agencies feel from marketing clients who want them to perform, to succeed, to help add value is extremely intense. I mean, every marketer we talk to says, I want to do the best possible thing I can do. The agencies who are winners are those who are able to give the client something they never thought was possible. That they have the crystal ball to look out there and say, Mr. Client, I can solve your problems. And then they get into the issue of, do I want one throat to choke and one back to pat in an integrated model? Or do I want to have the best in class in a media area, in a multinational area, in a digital relationship analytics area, or what? And the clients are schizophrenic about which model is the most effective model. So is it any wonder that there are great challenges for our agency partners?
Yes, I just wanted to build off of what Rob said, which is, historically, what we do hasn't fundamentally changed. How we do it has to change. And how we do it has to really represent the behavioral patterns of the consumer and the requirements, as Joanne just said, of what the client's looking for in terms of developing that client agency engagement. And that's what I think we're all being taxed with tremendously right now, because you do have the proliferation of media, you have this social media, you have the internet, you have digital, and that's just the beginning. As things keep and innovation keeps happening at an accelerated rate, it becomes more incumbent upon us, especially with the client saying, I want faster, cheaper, better. How do we deliver that kind of a model that addresses those needs without cheapening of the integrity of the ideas and how those ideas connect to consumer real time?
Well, let's build on that thought then. Perhaps I should ask you all just how that is affecting the business model for agencies, because clearly it must be putting some pressure on that, Rob.
Yes, it is putting a lot of pressure on it, and we're having to re-engineer the processes we have in the business. We're having to be much smarter about how we deploy technology, not just technology that we build ourselves, but many technologies from very fast-moving companies, and how we as an expert business integrate the use of those technologies to our purpose. The other thing that is kind of difficult to deal with and not recognized quite so much, particularly in the media agency category, is that we don't just serve brands, but we also serve corporations. And that's an interesting challenge for us. It's been said that often in advertising, agencies win one brand at a time and one country at a time. In the media agency in the world, we very often win one corporation at a time and one continent at a time. Now, within that comes all of the standard tasks that we've talked about before, of the new complexity of message distribution, but also further tasks like portfolio management in helping our clients understand strategies that they can allocate money in different ways between different brands and different markets to create an overall effect for the corporation. And my sense is that doing those things effectively actually now is creating more and more corporate value by doing that sensitively and working out where the next 10% of yield and margin is. And maybe there's something of a disconnect between the value that we're creating and the way many of our clients choose to pay us.
Sergey.
Just another observation about it.
You're in English.
Немножко другой взгляд на агрегацию. Интересно еще такой вызов, который перед нами стоит.
We face an interesting challenge.
Насколько комплексна стала структура,
The structure of the agency has become so complex
наиболее востребованные специалисты, которые
that the most wanted specialists whom we hire are graduates of technical colleges, mathematicians. We need number crunchers increasingly. And paradoxically, these people occupy very narrowly specialized jobs. So aggregation and aggregated solutions are a challenge for us.
Joanne in a second. Rob, we want to go in a minute.
Well, you raised something really interesting. Many people have talked in the last 2 days about talent and the value of human capital. Now, it's a generally true observation that our industry has always been a good home for people that were schooled in the liberal arts of some description or another. In the media world, we also employ people schooled in the liberal arts, but we like them to be numerate as well. But today, we're having to hire math graduates that can write in whole paragraphs. And that's a really difficult thing to do. And we're having to change the culture of our companies, our whole compensation strategy and so forth, to accommodate a new cultural breed of people inside our business that are very, very different from the people that form the core of the business for many generations.
What comes from the client itself? What's going specific?
Yeah.
Laurence, do you quickly want to take the admin?
Well, no, I again just want to build off of what's already been said. I mean, we're really talking about change management, right? And when we take a look at our organization, really addressing what our client needs are, I think really hits 3 key points. Philosophically, we need to be able to change. I think operationally, we need to be able to change. And I think from a delivery sensibility, we need to be able to change. And the biggest impediment to that is the psychology of the people in our organization, because we have rewarded them for building really great experts and becoming very proficient in very vertical subject matter. So to really start to develop integration, we need to be able to start to develop a whole new breed of marketing communication specialists that are like Renaissance practitioners that are very fluent in all of the disciplines. And the concern is at the same time, you do not want to lose the leading authority platforms of each discipline practice. So it's almost like developing a grade so that you have people that are educated on above the line, below the line, multimedia, multi-platform. At the same time, you need to make sure that you have leadership figures that are really driving the best-in-class practices and innovation of each. And it's the intersection of it. Okay, that might sound like it's an easy job. That's a very difficult transformation to take a company through, number one. But I think the most important thing through all of this is we talk about integration. We talk about it as it's a strategy. It's not. Integration is a tactic. And if you ask why does a client want integration, they want integration so they have a dashboard and they can view everything that's happening in their organization. But it's a means to an end, and that end is all about optimization. It's how do you optimize your resources? How do you optimize your talent pool? How do you optimize the results? How do you optimize the social media? How do you optimize and select which ones are going to work on your best behalf? NPS, fortify your brand. And how do you optimize that brand in today's ever-changing world? So when we talk about all of these things, they're the same things that we spoke about 30 years ago, but not as complex. NPS, not as urgent and as immediate because of technology and how it has changed our face.
Well, let's build on integration. Joanne, I was struck by something Rob said about the disconnect between agencies and their clients. Perhaps you want to talk about that.
Yes, sometimes clients and agencies just don't communicate. I mean, for crying out loud, we're in the communications business, so...
That must make us good communicators, of course.
So what's wrong with this picture? We had a client call us about 18 months ago, and he said, "Hi, Joanne, my name is Mark. I'm not happy with my agency. Can you help me find a new one?" Now, how many seconds did it take for me to say that? I'm from New York. I talk fast, but maybe 30 seconds. So Mark, a total stranger, was calling me saying, "I need help." So I said to Mark, "What have you done?" And he said, "What do you mean, what have I done?" I said, "Have you told the agency CEO?" And he said, "Well, not exactly." So that's the key issue. Don't be afraid to have an open, candid conversation. Otherwise, you don't need marriage counselors like us. But these are professional, world-class communications companies who want nothing more than to handle a tough conversation. I'm a big guy, these guys would say. I can handle it. Tell me if something's wrong. Because I'm a firm believer an agency should never be surprised if a piece of business is going into review, if there are good communications. So it's a classic disconnect.
The patient was in perfect health until the exact moment.
Until you died.
Well, I think that sounds like a classic British conversation, isn't it? Have you told the agency directly? Not exactly. That sounds like very British reticence. Laurence has mentioned the dreaded I word, integration. Rob, this is clearly an issue for agencies as to what that really means. What is integration? It means something different for every agency.
Well, I think there's something that sits at the heart of the notion of integration. Integration requires some combination of structure, systems, and behaviour. Of these three, easily the most important is behaviour. Because if two groups of people who are experts work for the same organisation and don't like each other and don't respect each other, you do not have integration just as they've got the same name over the door. It would be absolutely simple to imagine that you can have people of the same values, the same goals, united, often by a client who, in my view, is the arch integrator of all of this, and that those two agencies can work together to produce a fantastic outcome. And I freely admit that some of the relationships we have in the GroupM agencies that are with agencies that are not part of WPP are every bit as good, and on occasion better than the ones we have within it. And so structure, systems and behaviour. And frankly, I think that clients, with the help of people like Joanne, need to make decisions about what the best-in-class solutions to their problem are. If they find them integrated under Laurence's roof, that's fine. If they find them integrated by coming to my roof and Laurence's roof together, that's fine too.
Just very quickly, Rob, define what you mean though by integration. What does it mean to you in terms of the system being under one roof?
I think when a client defines integration, they're talking about a group of people working together towards a single goal who check their individual disciplines at the door beyond the point at which they're adding value to a process, and their expectation is that it won't be a turf war, particularly over money. It may be something of a turf war over ideas, and that's the behaviour they're trying to induce. And often, and I think all the clients in the room would accept it, they often would like their agencies to behave in a way that, frankly, the clients themselves find it very difficult to behave in, particularly when it involves crossing borders.
If I can jump in on that, because that's a really key point. Agencies are criticized by clients all the time for not being integrated. But the truth of the matter is, the client community is as integrated as they should be. Our international firm, Scan International, did a survey where we polled agency leaders. And the biggest issue that agency leaders found with clients was they're not integrated. Only 10% of agency leaders said clients are well integrated. So here's the thing, you have a situation where there's a chief marketing officer and a chief communications officer. They both report to the chief executive officer or the president. Which one owns social media? Which one owns word of mouth? Both of them own. So they're not integrated, yet they're pointing the fingers. So as agency colleagues, there's an extra burden to deal with the fact that client brethren are not integrated and work together to break down the roles, break down everything, put the brand first. I mean, sitting here, and we're going to see the Bolshoi tonight, I'm thinking about orchestras. And an orchestra is a great metaphor for agency integration. There are soloists, a great cellist, a great violinist, but we want the whole music to be beautiful.
Well, except that most orchestras don't deal with the idea of the score changing in the middle of the performance.
Yeah, but that's the reality with agencies.
Okay, so if you really think about that, the score changing in the middle of the performance, it highlights what we just heard before. It's about real time, right?
It's real time.
And if you compound that by looking at the way most agencies are structured, we talk about integration as well as clients, yet they're so siloed, and every silo holds its own P&L. Hate to say this, but the truth of the matter is people are going to get into turf wars. And instead of having the conversation about how the idea is best maximized via all those channels and touch points, they're concerned about their budgets being diminished. Same thing with clients. When clients walk in a room and they talk about integration and they want this seamless, holistic approach to their business, the biggest impediment that prevents them from being able to deliver it against it is the way that they've carved up their budget. So somehow, in our model, we pretty much, people say 360 yesterday said was dead, subsidiaries and all stuff coming together. Well, it's still very much alive in our organization. The thing is, we have liberated our heads of each of the disciplines from having P&L responsibility. So that when they come together, all of the disciplines, it's only about one thing. It's about trying to find a modern solution and how to use that idea across all those channels. And I'm not saying that's perfect. It's still a headset game, and it's also about the relationships and the trust that the people at the table have in terms of delivering that end goal.
So Sergey, is it integrate or die? Is that what the agency business has come down to? Sorry? Is it integrate or die? Is that really what the agency business has come down to? There's a choice. We don't integrate, then survival will be a question mark.
I think the world is... Мне кажется, что на самом деле и мир в значительной степени заинтегрирован. Мы говорим о меняющемся мире, мы говорим о многообразии средств доставки, огромном количестве тачпоинтов. При всем при этом, при всех тех возможностях, которые в нем существуют в современном мире, их все больше и больше, за всем этим зачастую теряется здравый смысл. Проявляется это и на уровне агентства, проявляется на уровне клиента. Часто мы сталкиваемся с ситуацией, когда даже не невозможно интегрировано и внутри агентства, и внутри клиента. Зачастую это прямая вражда, прямая конкуренция. Мне кажется, то, о чем говорил Марис сегодня, очень важно. Это то, что меняется целеполагание нашей жизни. Меняется то, что мы ищем в нашей жизни. Меняется то, что мы должны... Наверное, смысл жизни. Вот это на сегодняшний день не существует. А это главный интегратор. Если есть в агентстве, если в агентстве есть и behavior, и все другие элементы, значит там есть shared goal, чистый shared goal. Если он есть, появляется здравый смысл, все понимают, зачем они живут, что они делают и как двигаться дальше. Зачастую этого нет. Разные сигналы приходят от клиентов.
Thank you, Sergey. Let's get to the bottom, let's get to the real point here, the heart of the matter. Joanne, you've touched on it already. It's money, isn't it? Or the lack of money. That's what's driving it.
Yeah, it's all about money. Show me the money, and I want more, and that's market share, sales. So I've got the Wall Street looking at us, I've got all the markets looking at us. I've got to have shareholder value. I have to remember it's not my money as a marketer, it's not the agency's money. For the most part, it's shareholder money. So we have a shareholder responsibility. So all the markets provide guidance in terms of how much money the marketers should make, how much money the agency should make, and there's a big, giant disconnect. There's a big squeeze. You know, during 2009, and lots of the speakers so far have been talking about the bad economy, there was a point of view that said 80% of something's better than 100% of nothing. So the marketers said, we can't afford to do as many things, so they cut back. Media providers, businesses were hurt, agencies' margins were hurt, because the marketers moved into a test and learn mentality. We don't have the money to do a big launch program, so let's test, learn, like a stock portfolio. A few will be winners, a few will be sinkers, and when the economy gets better, we'll go forward with the winning ideas. So now that the economy is better, how do the receivers of the client money get it back? Some of it you'll never get back. So my challenge to agency colleagues is you've got to reinvent what's new. You've got to take things that are commodities and admit that they're commodities, find a lower cost way of handling the commodities, and where you really can provide the brain trust, the value add, you know, the top of the funnel, as I'm fond of saying. This piece up here that I absolutely, positively can't do as a marketer without a brilliant agency partner, that I'll pay a premium for. I'm not going to pay a premium for a commodity.
Laurence, then, how do you stay top of the creative tree and do more for less? I mean, that's a tough
Absolutely, but I want to focus on what I think Joanne just said, which is spot on. I think the value add that agencies are working under a premise that we've commoditized ourselves, the world has commoditized us. The way that we reinvent and we bring back that value deals with the new world. How do we get ahead of everything that's happening? Because we are constantly right now, whether we like it or not, in a change management role. That's what we're doing. Our clients are living in a real-time world. They're focusing on Wall Street. They're looking at their stock daily. They are making critical business decisions. And they want to have that same sense of urgency and immediacy on their funds, on their use of their brands, and how they're working. So when we talk about this whole new world, we talk about social media, we talk about digital, it's how are we developing that data sensibility, that test, learning, refinement? How are we elevating those learnings to true best practices that can work across all different sectors as well as all different touch points? It's at that point that we're leading our client into the new age, instead of PS responding to their lack of confusion based on the complexity of what's happening. The other part to that as well is it's not the client really leading us, and it's not us leading the client, it's the consumer leading us. They're telling us it's their behavior that's setting that platform for everything to happen. So to talk about ideas now, it's also getting to, from a communications point of view, how do we not just sell a TV commercial, but how do we develop ideas that are rich in content and have application across every channel and touch point? Because the world, the consumer no longer lives in segmented environment. Look at these kids today. You know, it's interesting. Yesterday somebody was presenting, and I just stood in the back, and I was looking at the audience, and I counted 123 people on their BlackBerry. So I want you to think about that for a moment. If that's us, and we're not that younger generation, that younger generation has their BlackBerry on, their iPhone on, their iPod on, they're doing everything. They're multitasking to the truest extent. How do we develop ideas that are just as present as they are, living in that moment through all of the gadgetry and communication? Whoever can identify formulas and solutions to help move there is going to be injecting value back into the client engagement.
I'm going to be looking at the audience now with renewed interest, see what we're up to.
Who's on their
BlackBerry? Yeah, exactly. Hands up if you're doing something else right now. Rob Norman, then, it is a challenge for the agencies, though, isn't it? Engaging the best creative brains, when actually the money is not flowing as freely as it did 18 months, 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Well, I'll speak for the media agencies, if I may. I've never been anywhere near the top of a creative tree. I look up to people like Laurence in awestruck and will continue to do so, Laurence. I think the big fear, if I was a client, about the way the compensation debate's gone in the last year is that you must know, if you think about it over any period of time longer than 1 year, that the agencies you choose to work with will find it harder and harder to recruit the highest potential talent into their systems. We all know that there is a short-term effect of marketing and a long-term effect of marketing. There is a short-term effect of cost-cutting, and there is a long-term effect of cost-cutting. And if you believe that, you go to the agency community in pursuit of the best talent, then you need to be aware of what those long-term consequences are. And it's no secret and no surprise that Procter & Gamble, who are recognised throughout our industry, with others, but recognised throughout our industry as an outstanding client to do business with, is very, very engaged with the agencies about creating fair compensation schemes, because they know having the talent is important. I think when you're in the media agency world, you think about it maybe a little bit differently. There's two things. My sense is that in a world where content creation and content distribution is becoming more and more atomized, there are more different kinds of units going to more and different kinds of places. Simply, the demand for the man-hours of manufacturing and distribution will go up. We will, at some level or another, earn more money over time, simply because we're doing more things. The other part of it, which is somewhat more controversial depending on which market you look in, is also in the media agency world an increasing appetite among our companies to look at areas where we might take risks, where we might think about how do we get paid for the performance of what we do, not just as an agency service. How might we get paid as a result of taking plain raw media inventory, call it plain vanilla, if you like, and turning that inventory into 32 flavours of inventory that's valuable to the Ford Motor Company or to Procter & Gamble. And by making our own investments in technology, our own investments in data management, create a new value from this thing that would otherwise be a commodity. And our request to our clients is, let's have a conversation about this. Let's be transparent about how we wish to go about doing this, and let's work out a way that we can create value of which you're the biggest beneficiary, but that we can be a beneficiary of as well, without you worrying so much about how many man-hours you're paying for in a year for a media plan.
Sergey, it is a big issue, isn't it? This issue of persuading clients to keep paying large amounts of money so that agencies can remain as creative as they ever have been.
It's not about large amounts. Reasonable. Во многом это производная, to large extent, it's a result of our own complexes, because we cannot articulate what we cannot quite open.
Производная нашего articulate clearly what is our value. Very often, that means that we have difficulties with articulating what is our value. And this is a challenge. When I was talking about common sense, when I was talking about results, actually talking about your brief, what I work for, I've never seen such an easy brief. Because in this case, I would probably read it and go into oil business or something like this to make more money. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. I think we're lucky in most of the cases. I'm talking about reasonable compensation. I absolutely agree. Many clients really appreciate the effort, really see things long term, and are ready for your wages. In Russia, at least, I can only talk about Russian situation. With some agencies, we fully understand our weaknesses. We are transparent with clients, and that simply prevents us from. We should overcome this mental difficulty and start talking about future, start talking about what we need today in order to be much better tomorrow. Joanne?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the billable hours point, because the billable hours point is a very dangerous one. Suppose Sergey and I both own agencies, and your agency is twice as fast and twice as brilliant, and mine is slow. and not very good. And we're both getting paid the same hourly rate. That means I'm getting paid more for being bad, and you're getting paid less. There's something wrong with that model. So that's why Group's, the Procters and Gamble's of the world, a lot of the leading marketers are looking at smarter ways to remunerate agencies for value creation, for the big stuff.
That's much more risky for the agencies, though, isn't it? As you were touching on, Rob, if you move to a different model of payment, and actually a lot of the burden is being carried by the agencies, not the client.
Well, it's only a problem if you're not any good.
Yeah.
I think
as long as the client happens, of course, may not be about good and bad.
Well, I think that agencies and clients, by and large, tend to deserve each other in the end. And I think that there are many client relationships that on the face of it look like they should be very good that aren't, and many that when you start are very difficult and very challenging that turn out to be incredibly productive because great relationships are sometimes forged in fires. And my sense is that what we're always looking for clients, we don't mind any client that's hard, we just want them to be fair and somewhat reasonable. And I think the alignment around a goal about what does success look like, if we could say today, what does a good year look like? 1 year from today, and then sit down and have a rational conversation.
Often aided by someone like Joanne, who's an honest broker in a situation like that, then we should look at the contribution we made. I mean, I don't even mind working with procurement people, especially, as long as the procurement people invest their time understanding the way the method, the marketplace actually works, understands the nuance between one country and another, the nuance between one media vendor and another, and chooses at least in their evaluation to level the playing field. We, as a group of mostly professional people, I think welcome professional interventions and assistance from people like Joanne, but we just need to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing.
I think that's where it also comes back to where you started. It's all about the health of the relationship, the honest, open communication, and if compensation is one of them, if you've got a good relationship with your client and you're delivering against what, then there should be absolutely no reason that the two of you can't sit in the room and work that out.
But are you worried though, Laurence, that procurement officers are driving this? And actually, what they're saying to our agencies and to media agencies is, we actually don't need you to be making much money. We want you to do the work, but we think your profit margin should be pretty small.
It's very interesting. I work with a lot of different procurement leaders from different companies, and it really does depend on what the mission of that procurement department and that agent and that client business is defined to do. Some of them come in because they're just trying to drive costs down.
Absolutely.
And they say, we want to drive your percentage down by 20%, 10%. We can keep the same scope of work, and please do not touch the staff. Tell me how that works. So you have other procurement.
They see you as an input, just as any other input.
Exactly. You're commoditized right there. We're interchangeable parts. You have other procurement people that will walk into a room and they're talking about cost. And if you can change that dialogue to cost from value, that's truly quantifiable and measurable, and talk about effective communications that's going to deliver a quantifiable measurement of return, they will engage. So it's who are you talking to on that, and how do you get to the right person to have that dialogue?
And a PS to that point, the average tenure of a CMO is about 22 months. The average tenure of the procurement officer is a lot longer. So if you can build a partnership with procurement colleagues, that could be a beautiful thing.
That's what I was going to say. Talking about procurement people, they can be professional, good people, understanding the business. They can be lousy. Both is happening. But it's much easier to deal with marketing person. Because procurement person will understand why this cost is, make an effort to understand all the details, how it is organized, what is needed. Marketing person can say, it's expensive. It's interesting. You listen
Listen to Maurice this morning, fabulous speech, and listen to Mark yesterday, fabulous speech, and it all came down to the trust between brands and corporations and their consumers. Now, if we're in the business of building brands and distributing messages for brands that are about building trust with consumers, it would sure help a lot if we started off by all of the stakeholders in the game who were doing it by trusting each other.
That's right.
we're at obviously at a particular point in the economic cycle, this recovery from the aftermath of this very deep recession. Do you think that this debate over procurement, over driving down costs will change as more money comes back into the global economy, particularly into those, or is this a trend that's going to endure way beyond the upturn in the economic cycle?
I don't think we're going back. I think let's be realistic. Once clients establish a new benchmark, that's the new reality. The question becomes, goes back to our previous dialogue, how do we inject greater value into our relationships? How do we get to be more modern, get our hands around what's happening, develop new methodologies of delivery, and making sure that our clients are getting the value that they need. You talk about what does success look like. That's where the dialogue needs to begin, and that's where all the measurements and the dialogues from that point on need to continue.
Joanne, do you think there's any going back, or are your clients you deal with telling you, that's it, this is where we are now, and this is the way
it's going to continue, but I promise you it will get better, because procurement executives are taking understanding and learning marketing much better, and I hope we have procurement colleagues here at IAA that have the opportunity to learn from eminent people like yourselves and everyone else we've heard from so far.
So good.
Agree, but probably we'll see more performance more in deeper.
Rob, you're going to try and persuade the procurement people in future to top up the money?
No, I have 2 words to say, and the 2 words are must stop.
Right. Let's say that's not a message to procurement officers. Okay. Thank you very much, Rob, Sergey, Joanne, and Laurence. Thank you. And thank you to the audience. Spasiba. Well, I hope you got something out of that. I hope it's something you can as you go now to lunch. Thank you.